If you walk through the streets of central London, it won't be long before you catch sight of a blue plaque on the outside of a building. There are thousands of them dotted around the city today. The scheme started 160 years ago, at the height of the British Empire, to commemorate famous people and the buildings with which they had an association. Typically, although not exclusively, the people honoured were wealthy or eminent white men, and what counted as heritage was commonly understood as the product of their deeds. We now live in a time where that understanding of heritage is being challenged, and this challenge is reflected in the growing numbers of plaques put up to celebrate the contribution of previously under-recognised sections of society. In this film, we look in particular at the work of two organisations, Black History Walks and the Nubian Jack Community Trust, and their efforts to ensure that the contributions of black people are recognised and commemorated as part of the semiotic landscape of the city.
On this walk, we're pulling out all the African Caribbean history that's in the streets, the buildings and the architecture, because there's lots of it here if you know to look for. So I'll be your guide today. My name is Tony, and this walk starts and it ends near Bank Tube Station. So let's begin.
Black History Walks is an organisation that runs walks, talks, films, bus tours and river cruises on black history in London. So we have about 15 different walking tours in North, East, South and West. We have walks in Harlem, walks in Theatreland, walks in Elephant Castle. I've done all the regular kind of typical London walking tours. I've done like Jack the Ripper tour, Ghost tour, Charles Dickens, all the kind of ones that you see, you know, advertised in the mainstream. I've done all of them, and there was never any mention of black people at all. The walks themselves are educational in that if you get, 10 people in the walk, you might have one person who's 25, one who's 35, one who's 55, you might have some kids as well. And the way I do the walks is quite interactive. So by the end of the walk, you'll have the young people learn from the old people and vice versa, depending on what topic we're looking at. Even as we're walking from point to point, there's education taking place between not just the generations, because they might be from the same generation, but they have different experiences and they're taught to each other about what they've just heard. The importance is to give people that history so they know what happened. And also the other thing is that, you know, they might have been through that place or lived in that place for like 10, 15, 20 years or so and never heard a story before. So it's about giving people back, in effect, the history that they should have heard about, learned about when they were growing up, when they were going to school, which has not been part of the kind of mainstream narrative.
So the Blue Plaque scheme started in 1866 by the Society of Arts, which became what's today the Royal Society of Arts. They were acting on a suggestion by the MP William Ewart, who's probably best known for his role in foundation and propagation of public libraries. He got up in the House of Commons on the 17th of July 1863 and suggested it might be a good idea if there was some way of inscribing on houses that had been lived in by famous people, and he did use an ungendered term. He set the ball rolling, and the Society of Arts, slightly belatedly 3 years later, picked it up and started to look into ways of doing this. There were women included. I mentioned that Ewart's initial speech was sort of ungendered in its suggestion of commemorating famous figures, people. There were, among this 34, there were 4 plaques to women, so not very many, but there were some. Sarah Siddons, the actress, was the first woman to get one. The oldest surviving plaque to a woman is the one to Fanny Burney, the writer. Joanna Bailey, the writer, has got one too.
We also raise funds to put up plaques, blue plaques, to people who have not been recognised by history, or by the mainstream rather. And the connection between our blue plaques and the English Heritage blue plaques is that English Heritage does not have enough blue plaques to black people. In London, I think it's only like 4% of their plaques are to black people, 4%. And London is something like between 30 to 40% black.
The people that are commemorated now, it has changed a lot over time. You know, I mean, it's a lot more representative. The steering group that we set up on black and minority ethnic representation was set up about 7 years ago, something like that. And there had been prior efforts to work with organisations such as the Black and Asian Studies Association in order to get more nominations through in that area.
So we work with a group called Nubian Jack. Nubian Jack is a very well-known Blue Plaque or Black Blue Plaque installing organisation.
Okay, so I'm going to go over here. Interview me here. So we memorialise the wonderful diverse presence in London and around England by putting up these plaques and statues. And this particular one is to Greensleeves.
Thank you so much, Jack, and it's an absolute honour to be here this morning. Jack, who looks to our history makers and demands that we are reminded by them every day. And we've had some incredible examples. This must be the, I don't know, 6th, 8th, 81st, but in North Kensington, I think it's the 8th one I've been to. 16th in Kensington, I've been corrected here.
Heritage isn't just about putting up plaques and monuments. It's also about how the process of engaging with them could not only tell us about individual figures from the past, but also help us to understand our collective present and the forces that shaped it. And it's the relationship between the values of the past and those of the present, which means that heritage can also be a very contested term.
There's no such thing as heritage. And what I mean by that is the emphasis, the traditional emphasis that is particularly in Europe, that is put on things such as buildings, archaeological sites, monuments and so forth. These things are not in and of themselves heritage. So when I say there's no such thing as heritage, I'm saying let's deprivilege the emphasis that we put on things in the analytical space and look at the idea of heritage as an ongoing performative process of making meaning.
So I've heard sugar, corn, not pineapple. I'll give you a clue. It's a bad habit some old people have. There we go, right? First of all, who do you see on the front of that logo? Right. 2 black people right in your face, right?
I think the Blue Plaque scheme has become a partly democratic process because it works on public suggestions. And that has happened in an organic manner. People, as far as we know, they just started sending in suggestions, and that happened quite early on in the London County Council's stewardship of the scheme, so in the Edwardian period. When we don't have the records of how the Society of Arts or the Royal Society of Arts worked other than the minute books, and they don't really reveal a great deal. I mean, I think it was probably more of a closed circle.
I think theories tend to exclude people's lived experience. People do things with things. Heritage, whether we're talking about archaeological sites, museum collections, monuments, intangible events, or whatever, they are cultural tools that people use to help remember and to forget, that help them make, as I keep saying, to make meaning, to validate or invalidate a range of historical narratives.
As you walked up into this area, do you see an animal in front of you?
Lion.
Lion. So you reckon it's a lion? And this goes back to what you could call cultural appropriation, that when the Europeans went to Africa, they saw the African people using lions and leopards as symbols of strength and power and prestige and royalty, and they copied the idea. They just borrowed it, right? Simple as that, right? So now let's think about how often we find these lions all across our society. For example, what does the English football team have on their t-shirts?
Lions.
3 lions, not 3 squirrels or hedgehogs or badgers or foxes or bulldogs or deers. 3 lions that don't exist in this society at all. They're from Africa.
What some of my research has revealed is that people engage with heritage sites or engage with intangible heritage events or sit down with their grandmas and talk about family history across the dining room table or whatever the heritage event may be. They engage in these processes because it's a process of emotional investment in the memories and the historical narratives that are being generated.
I'm going to tell you one story of one black guy who kind of symbolizes the massive contribution and effort and commitment and sacrifice made by black people in general to World War II, just by telling this one guy's story, right? But first of all, you got to give me marks out of 10 for how cool does this brother look?
We're engaging in heritage because it gives us a sense of validation. It gives us a sense of the emotional legitimacy that we have in our own sense of identity and that of our own community, but also in the narratives and collective memories around that.
Charity was founded on the basis that heritage is a positive and a thing and an enrichment to people's lives, and I like to think that blue plaques are the same thing.
The type of heritage we're looking to address or represent is the heritage that's been ignored by the mainstream.
The Blue Plaque events are one of my absolute favourites, and that is because I'm all about legacy and history. Legacy is something we feel because we have experienced it. It's something that we've lived, it's something that we will remember. The stories are best told when we tell our stories ourselves.
And basically we kind of sometimes identify the locations, then we raise the funds, then you and Jack will put the plaque up.
Well, I kind of stumbled into it really. I didn't come up with a master plan. I was invited to do a plaque to Bob Marley by English Heritage, and based on the success of that, I thought, you know what? There's so many names and figures, male and female, particularly of African ancestry, that need to be memorialised and highlighted. So that's how we got into doing plaques.
So rather than kind of ask for people, we've just done it ourselves.
This is my 87th plaque.
I'm his biggest sponsor, and we've put up, I think, 10 plaques so far, and there's about another 10 more to do. We're actually working on one right now to a guy called Dr. Cecil Belfield Clark.
As the first minority ethnic woman Chief Officer at the British Medical Association and their EDI lead, I'm honoured to say a few words about Dr. Cecil Belfield Clark and his long-lasting contributions to medicine and society.
It's been implicit in the scheme from the outset is that there's a positive legacy from the people commemorating it. From 1956, there's a set of criteria under which the London County Council, later the Greater London Council, and later English Heritage judge the suggestions for plaques. And the 1956 wording, which we still have, is a positive contribution to human welfare or happiness.
History chooses and dictates who should be honoured with those plaques.
So this is the ivory bangle lady. They found her skeleton back in 1901, but with modern technology they were able to remake her face and also analyse her bones to work out she came from North Africa.
Throughout our history, many ethnic minorities have made significant contributions, but their achievements have often been overlooked and forgotten due to systemic racism and discrimination based on the colour of their skin.
When you think of, like I mentioned, Belfield Clark, Tom Molyneux, Bill Richmond, there's a sister called Phyllis Wheatley, because that's our plaque. We put that plaque up a couple of years ago in Aldgate East. Phyllis Wheatley is the first black woman to have her book published back in 1773, and until we put that plaque up at that place there in Aldgate East, there had been no plaque to her at all. So there are people like that who have not got the recognition they deserve for whatever reason, and that's why we do what we do.
The thing is, you see these monuments, but you know they have a meaning, but you never stop, you know, and all these symbols, especially the lion, you think, why does this country have a symbol of a lion? You see it all the time and it becomes the national symbol, but you never understand why. So just to be able to stop and think, that's what I really enjoyed about it. And I'll be analysing everything where I'm walking buildings. So it's really, really good. It's really good.
So like Jack, I believe in the importance of plaques and commemoration. But plaques are so easy and accessible. They're the ones that are along our streets. It is walking history and heritage, and it is so important.
And to have him as part of our local history, the history makers, and for every time that people walk around the area where they're looking at the blue plaques, and we'll look him up and go, oh my goodness, what an extraordinary person. He changed lives.
I suppose it's a reminder that, you know, we're, you know, standing on the shoulders of giants or whatever, you know, that this is all sort of, you know, we're part of a longer process.
For me, heritage is always about people. You know, people use things to do things in society. For me, heritage is a process in which we are continually making meaning.
And I suppose one reason why you have all those statues around the place is to kind of recognise these heroes or these kind of important people, and to remind the present day as to who they were, what they did and why they did what they did.
And as mayor, in association with the Nubian Jack Community Trust, I am delighted to participate in the unveiling of this plaque.
After 5, yeah? When it comes to 1, reveal it to the world. Here we go! 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Thank you, man. Cheers.
Worries and problems just a come in shepherd to street. You hear me say? The people try to tell we one thing, another man I tell we something, but only judge and know that we can't carry. I'ma tell you, what's the secret? Worries and problems everywhere. Let people even know. Worries and problems, but we going to overcome. Watch me say, boy, boy, yo, yo, yo. Yeah, boy, what I say? Boy, yo. What was that? Worries and problems are coming and we can't take my life, bill. Worries and problems, next thing we can't pay for my phone bill. When I think, check up my girl and me, check up the world and make it not, they check up the world.
African people, black people have put themselves on the map, and it's my job and other people like me to remind people like you and the viewing public of these wonderful, magical, amazing achievements that they have done. And that's the mission that I'm fortunate and privileged to be part of.